Maria Marten was born on the 24th of July, 1801 year. She was the daughter of Thomas Marten, a mole catcher from Polstead, Suffolk in March 1826 year. At the age of 24, she entered into an affair with 22-year-old William Corder, 1803 year of birth. Maria Marten was an attractive woman, and as a result of her connections with her neighbors, she had already given birth to 2 children. One of them, the son of Thomas William's older brother, died in infancy. Another named Thomas Henry was alive by that time. Although Thomas's father Henry did not want to communicate with Maria after the birth of the child, he sent money from time to time for his maintenance. William Corder was the son of a local farmer and had a reputation as a fraud and a ladies' man. At school, he was nicknamed the Fox for his cunning. Corder fraudulently sold pigs belonging to his father. And although the father settled the case without the intervention of the authorities, the son did not change his behavior. Later, he received £93 on a fake check and helped a local thief Sam, or Handsome Smith, steal a pig from a neighboring village. When the local constable questioned Smith about the theft, he allowed himself a statement about Corder, which turned out to be prophetic. "I'll be damned if they don't hang him one day." After the fraudulent sale of pigs, Corder was sent to London in disgrace. William was called back to Polstead after his brother Thomas drowned trying to cross a frozen pond. There was no need for someone to replace the deceased. Corder's father and 3 brothers died one after the other within 18 months, and William and his mother were left to manage the farm. Although Corder wanted to keep his relationship with Maria a secret, in 1827 year, at the age of 25, she gave birth to a child. Maria believed that she and Corder should get married. The child died. Later, the documents suggested that he had been killed. But apparently, Corder was still going to marry Maria in the summer in the presence of Maria's stepmother and Marten. He suggested that Maria meet him in the Red Barn. Where were they supposed to go to Ipswich? Corder stated that he had heard rumors that parish officials were going to prosecute Maria for her illegitimate children. At first, he offered to run on Wednesday evening, but later decided to stay until Thursday evening. On Thursday, he was delayed again. Some sources mention that the reason was his brother's illness, although most sources claim that all of his brothers had died by this time. The next day, Friday the 18th of May, 1827 year, he came to the Marten cottage and, according to Anne Marten's testimony, told Maria that they should flee immediately, because he heard that the local constable James Balham had received a warrant for her pursuit. Balham later stated that he had never told the warrant about the warrants. It remains unknown whether the warrant lied or was simply wrong. Maria was worried that she couldn't run in broad daylight, but Corder ordered her to change into men's clothes so as not to arouse suspicion, while he takes her things to the barn, where she will meet him and change, after which they will go to Ipswich. After the warrant left, Maria went to the Red Barn, located on Barnfield Hill, half a mile from the Marten cottage. No one saw her alive anymore. Corder also disappeared, but later returned and stated that Maria was in the Case or Great Yarmouth or in another place nearby. He cannot bring her back because she has become his wife, which may cause the anger of her relatives and friends. As a result, Corder had to leave due to pressure from society. Corder wrote letters to Marten, stating that they were married and living on the Isle of Wight. He apologized that she didn't write anything herself. Corder gave various explanations for this. She is sick, injured her hand, or that her letters have been lost. Suspicions continued to grow. Stepmother Maria began to talk about her dreams, in which she saw that Maria was murdered and buried in the Red Barn. On the 18th of April, 1828, she persuaded her husband to go to the Red Barn and dig up one of the grain storage bunkers. He found the remains of his daughter packed in a bag. The body was badly decomposed, but it was still recognizable. The inquest was held at the Cock Inn, which has survived to this day in Polstead, where Maria's body was officially identified by her sister Anne. Maria's hair and some details of her clothes were still recognizable, but a well-known special sign of the victim, the missing tooth, disappeared along with the jaw bone. Evidence of Corder's involvement was found. His green handkerchief was wrapped around the neck of the deceased. Corder was found quite easily. A posted constable, Mr. Ayres, obtained his old address from a friend, and with the help of a Lambert Street, London police officer, James Lee, I tracked down Corder, who was in a boarding school for women in Bradford. Corder ran a boarding school with his new wife Mary Moore, whom he met through an ad placed in the Times newspaper. More than 100 people responded to the ad. Lee entered the boarding school under the pretext that he wanted to put his daughter here and took Corder by surprise in his office. The English novelist Thomas Hardy described his capture in a report written for the Dorset County Chronicle. He was sitting in the office where the ladies were having breakfast, dressed in a bathrobe. There was a clock in front of him, on which he timed the boiling of eggs. He led Corder aside and said that he had been seriously charged and could consider himself arrested. To further questions from the officer, Corder replied that he did not know Maria at all, and he did not know anything about the crime. During a search of the house, a pair of pistols were found, presumably bought on the day of the murder. Letters from Mr. Gardner could contain a warning that the crime was solved and a passport received from the French ambassador. This was proof that Corder could be preparing to escape. Corder was taken back to Suffolk County. His trial took place in the city of Bury St. Edmunds, in the building of the Board of the Earl, summoned on the 7th of August, 1828. City hotels began to fill up on the 21st of July. Due to the large number of those wishing to attend the meetings, the court was allowed only by tickets. Despite this, in order to get into the courtroom, the judge and judicial officials always had to make their way through the crowd gathering at the doors of the courtroom. The chief judge of the Treasury Court, Chief Baron Alexander, expressed dissatisfaction with the press coverage. That caused obvious damage to the defendant. Nevertheless, the Times thanked the public for its common sense, expressed in the unanimous recognition of Corder as the murderer of Marten. At the trial, Corder declared his innocence. The exact cause of Marten's death could not be determined. It was believed that the eye socket of the victim was pierced by a sharp object, possibly a short sword or a quarter dagger. But the same wound could have been inflicted by Marten's father's shovel when removing the body from the ground. Corder's handkerchief, wrapped around Marten's neck, did not exclude the possibility of strangulation. And in addition to the resulting confusion, the nature of the wounds on the victim's body led to the assumption that she had been shot. The indictment imputed to the warrant the murder of Maria Marten by criminally intentionally shooting her body with a pistol, as well as stabbing her with a dagger. In order to avoid the judge's ruling on a mistrial, Corder was charged with 9 articles at once, including forgery of securities, according to John Smith on 10 articles. And Marten was summoned to court to testify about the events of the day of Maria's disappearance and to tell about her further dreams. Thomas Marten then told the court how he dug up his daughter's body. Maria's 10-year-old brother said that before the alleged murder he saw Corder with a loaded pistol, and later noticed him walking from the barn with a pickaxe. Officer Lee testified about Corder's arrest and the items found during the search of his home. The prosecution stated that Corder never wanted to marry Maria, but she knew about some of his criminal transactions, which gave her power over him, and there were tensions between them, since he had previously stolen money sent to Maria by the father of her child. Corder told his version of events. He admitted that he was in the barn with Maria, but stated that he left the barn after talking to her. He said that when he left the barn, he heard a pistol shot and, running into the barn, found Maria killed. One of his pistols was lying next to her body. He asked the jury to interpret the doubts in his favor, but those, after conferring for 35 minutes, returned with a guilty verdict. Judge Alexander sentenced Corder to hanging and subsequent dissection. You will be sent back to the prison from where you were brought. Next Monday you will be taken out of there. They will bring you to the place of execution, and there you will be hanged by the neck and will hang until you die. Then your body will be dissected and anatomized. And may the all-merciful God, in his infinite kindness, have mercy on your soul. Corder spent the next 3 days in prison, agonizing over the question of whether to confess to the crime and sincerely repent of his sins before God. After several meetings with the prison chaplain, the request of his wife, and the appeals of his jailer and warden John O'Tridge, he confessed to the crime. Corder strongly denied stabbing Maria and claimed that he accidentally shot her in the eye when she was taking off her disguise. On the 1st of August, 1828, they were taken to the gallows of the city of Bury St. Edmunds. He was apparently too weak to stand without assistance. Shortly before noon, Corder was hanged in front of a huge crowd. According to the statement of one of the newspapers, 7,000 spectators were present. According to the estimates of another 20,000, at the insistence of the prison governor, before they put a cap on his head. He said in a weak voice, "I consider myself guilty. My punishment is just. I have earned my fate, and may God have mercy on my soul." An hour later, his body was removed from the gallows by the executioner John Foxton. According to his rights, he demanded the trousers and stockings of the executed man. The body was taken back to the courtroom in the city administration building, where it was opened along the abdominal cavity to expose the muscles. People were allowed to stay in the courtroom until the doors closed at 6 o'clock. According to the Norwich and Bury Post, over 5,000 people queued up to see the body. The next day, an autopsy and dismemberment of the body was carried out in the presence of doctors and Cambridge students. To demonstrate muscle contraction, a battery was connected to Corder's limbs. The sternum was opened, and the internal organs were examined. There was a controversy over whether strangulation was the cause of death. According to reports, Corder's chest continued to rise and fall for several minutes after hanging. Therefore, compression of the spinal cord is suggested as the probable cause of death. Since Corder's skeleton had to be assembled after the autopsy, it was impossible to examine the brain. Instead, the surgeons agreed to conduct a phrenological examination of the skull. The researchers claimed that Corder's skull was highly developed in the areas of stealth, acquisitiveness, destructiveness, fertility, and imitation, with some evidence of goodwill or reverence. A bust of Corder made by Child from the city of Banks, Suffolk, as a guide to chronological research, was placed in the Mose Hall of Bury Eds. The skeleton was assembled and used as a teaching aid in the West. Several death masks were made. A copy of one of them is in the museum. The museum also houses court items and some of Corder's personal belongings. Corder's skin was tanned by surgeon George Creed and used as the binding material for the murder report. Corder's skeleton was put on display at the Conn Museum of the Royal College of Surgeons next to the skeleton of Jonathan Wild. In the 2004 year, Corder's bones were removed from the exhibition and cremated. After the completion of the trial, doubts were expressed about the veracity of the story of the stepmother's dreams. About the fate of the child of Mary and William. The stepmother was only a year older than Maria, and there were rumors that Marten and Corder were in a relationship, and they planned to kill Maria in order to continue to meet without obstacles. It was said that the stepmother's jealousy became the motive for the discovery of the body, and her visions were just a deception, since she began to dream only a few days after Corder's marriage to Maria. There were rumors about the death of the child of Corder and Maria. Both of them said that they had buried the deceased child in the town of Sudburgh, Suffolk. But no records and traces of the child's grave were found. In his written confession, Corder indicated that on the day of Maria's murder, they argued whether the burial place would be discovered. In the 20th century, after the researcher and writer Donald McCormick published a book, the author mentioned some interesting facts, including hitherto unknown acquaintances between Corder and Thomas Griffiths, a counterfeiter and poisoner. At that time, when he was in London, and that the actress Caroline Palmer, who often played in a melodrama based on this case and the investigation, came to the conclusion that perhaps Corder did not kill Maria, but the local gypsy could have been the killer. However, McCormick's research on police and criminal histories remains questionable, and this conclusion has not been accepted by most researchers. In the case of the murder of Maria Marten, there were all the components necessary to arouse the close interest of society. A criminal landowner and an unhappy girl are a picturesque murder scene. Supernatural element in the form of prophetic dreams of the murdered stepmother. The work of detectives Ayres and Lee, who became the prototype of Detective Ferris Lee. A collective image from the anonymous play Maria Marten or The Murder in the Red Barn. Corder's new life, which began with the announcement of the search for a life partner. The excitement around the crime has given rise to a whole small industry for the production of souvenirs and tabloid essays, one way or another related to the history of the murder. The plays were already being staged when Corder was awaiting trial. After the execution, an unknown author published a melodrama based on the murder, which became the predecessor of the collection Newgate. The melodrama quickly became a bestseller. The theme of the murder in the Red Barn, along with stories about Jack Sheppard and other highwaymen, thieves and murderers, became a popular plot of cheap plays performed for the entertainment of the lower classes in the gin-soaked back rooms of inns. After the execution, publisher James Catnick sold over 1 million copies of newspaper leaflets. Catnick described the details of Corder's confession and execution, and included in the newspaper a sentimental ballad, presumably written by Core himself. It is more likely that the author of the ballad was Catnick himself, or one of his employees. At least 5 ballads appeared during the execution. Thanks to the atmosphere of excitement during the trial and the public demand for works created based on the murder, many works containing various versions of the murder were written and distributed, which created difficulties in separating the facts that really took place and had dramatic decorations for readers of that time. On the basis of official documents, good court reports were created. The best judicial report recognizes the work of journalist James Curtis, who spent time with a warrant and spent 2 weeks in Polstead interviewing residents affected by this murder. He published his book The Mysterious Murder of Maria Marten immediately after the end of the trial. Curtis, apparently, was already so associated with the case that the artist of one of the newspapers fulfills the requirements to draw the accused, portrayed him more like Curtis than Corder. The pieces of rope on which Corder was hung were sold apiece. A piece of Corder's scalp, along with an ear, was displayed in a shop on Oxford Street. A lock of Maria's hair was sold for 2 guineas. The post was a tourist attraction even from Ireland. According to Curtis, only in 1828 year, 200,000 people visited the post. Of particular interest were the Red Barn and Martin Cottage. The barn was stripped for souvenirs. The walls were stripped of boards that were sold on a toothpick. The barn was planned to be demolished after the trial, but it stood until 1842 year, until it burned to the ground. Even Mary's gravestone in the cemetery of St. Mary's Church was eventually completely smashed and destroyed by souvenir hunters. Ceramic models and sketches were sold. Songs were composed, one of them was performed in operas by Ralph Vaughan Williams. Corder's skeleton was put on display in a glass cabinet and equipped with a special mechanism. When anyone got close enough, the skeleton pointed to a collection box. The skull was later taken away by Dr. Kilner, who wanted to add it to his extensive collection of memorabilia of the Red Barn event. After a series of misfortunes that befell him, Kilner became convinced that a curse was hanging over the skull, and handed it over to his friend Hopkins. Nevertheless, misfortunes continued to haunt both friends, and in the end, they paid for the burial of the skull according to Christian customs, in the hope of avoiding the alleged curse.